In tonight's episode, we're heading deep into the jungles of rural Philippines, a place where the trees seem to whisper, and every rustle in the leaves might be more than just the wind. This story takes place near a quiet village, surrounded by dense forest, the kind where paths vanish and the night never feels empty. Locals speak of something that cries in the darkness, something that sounds heartbreakingly human, but isn't. Imagine hearing a baby sobbing alone in the middle of the woods. Most people wouldn't hesitate to help. But here's the thing, that's exactly what it wants. Because by the time you realize it's not a baby, it's already too late. Let's dive in. The story follows Elena, a 24-year-old anthropology student from Manila who had traveled to a remote province in the Visayas for a field study. Her goal was simple: interview rural families about pre-colonial folklore, especially tales involving spirits and forest creatures. It was part of her final thesis, and her professor had connections in a quiet farming village nestled near the edge of an uncharted jungle. The kind of place where phone signals fade and electricity flickers after dark. Elena arrived just before sundown, greeted by chickens darting across dirt roads and old women peeking from behind wooden windows. She was offered a guest room in an old bahay kubo on stilts, owned by an elderly couple who spoke in hushed tones when she asked about forest spirits. Every answer was vague, every smile forced. They told her to be careful, especially at night, and never, under any circumstance, to go into the forest if she heard crying. She laughed at first, assuming it was just village superstition meant to scare outsiders. But the air felt different here, still, heavy. The jungle loomed just beyond the edge of the village, like a wall of darkness that watched back. Even the children avoided it after dusk. Elena set her voice recorder and notebook on the desk, ready to begin her research in the morning. But that night, just past midnight, she woke up to a sound that didn't belong. A baby, crying, somewhere deep in the trees. At first, Elena thought she was dreaming. The sound was faint, muffled by the thick bamboo walls of the bahay kubo, but unmistakable. A baby, crying softly in the distance. Not frantic, just persistent. She sat up, heart already racing. The old couple had no children in the house, and the nearest neighbor was at least a 15-minute walk away. She leaned toward the window and listened. It was coming from the edge of the jungle. The next morning, she mentioned it casually over breakfast. The old woman froze, mid-stir with her coffee. Her husband said nothing, just quietly crossed himself and looked away. Elena waited for an answer, but none came. Only a muttered phrase she didn't recognize in the local dialect. When she pressed again, the old woman finally spoke, eyes lowered. It calls to those who don't belong. Later that day, as Elena interviewed villagers under the shade of a mango tree, she brought it up again. The crying, the forest, the strange reaction from her hosts. An older man squinted at her and said, "You shouldn't have heard that." Another woman turned pale and told her to sleep with salt under her bed. One little boy ran off as soon as she mentioned it. The atmosphere shifted. No one laughed. No one brushed it off. Still, Elena remained skeptical. She chalked it up to folklore, mixed with rural paranoia. But when she returned to her room that evening, she found something odd. Her voice recorder, which she'd left off on her desk, was running. She pressed play. It was her own voice, soft, half asleep, saying, "I hear it again. It's closer tonight." That night, the crying came back. Only this time, it was louder, closer. It echoed just beyond the wooden slats of her bedroom window, bouncing off the trees like the jungle itself was weeping. Elena lay frozen under her blanket, barely breathing. The sound wasn't just crying anymore. There were wet gasps between the sobs, like the child was choking or calling out between coughs. She told herself not to move, not to look, but curiosity clawed at her. She cracked open the curtain. There was nothing, just dense trees and darkness. No wind, no crickets, just the sound of a child in pain. The next morning, she asked the old couple again. This time, the husband snapped. "You want to help?" he barked. "You think it's a child, you go. Bring it in. See what follows you back. His wife slapped his arm and hissed something under her breath, but Elena had already gone pale. She wasn't used to that kind of rage, especially not from the quiet, timid man who barely spoke the day before. She tried to focus on her work, recorded more interviews, but the villagers had changed. Some refused to speak to her. Others stared like she was already marked. One woman, who had smiled at her the day before, placed a tiny pouch in her hand and said, "Keep this in your pocket. Don't let it fall. If you drop it, it finds you." Inside was a clump of ginger, some salt, and what looked like ashes. That night, Elena stayed awake, holding her phone like a weapon. Midnight passed. Nothing. But at 1:47, the crying returned, right outside her door. She reached for her phone to record it. Her screen was black. Dead. Even though she charged it to full, she fumbled for her recorder. Dead, too. She lit a candle, hand trembling, and stepped toward the door. That's when she saw it. A shadow, small and hunched, just beyond the bamboo slats. Not moving, just standing, listening, as if it knew she was there. The crying stopped. Silence. Then it giggled. A high-pitched, broken sound that didn't belong in any child's throat. Elena backed away, breath caught in her lungs. In the morning, she went straight to the village healer, a woman named Lola Pilar, who lived in a hut surrounded by broken mirrors and burnt offerings. Elena begged her for answers. Lola Pilar didn't flinch. "You heard the Tiyanak," she said simply. "And it heard you too." Lola Pilar didn't waste time. She tied a red string around Elena's wrist, sprinkled ash into her hair, and handed her a worn-out amulet shaped like a tiny, crying face. "Keep this on you," she said. "If it turns warm, don't run. Don't scream. Just pray." That night, Elena packed her bags. She didn't care about the thesis anymore. She just wanted to leave. But the bus out of the village wouldn't come until morning. So she waited, curled in a corner of the room, all the lights on, every protective charm pressed to her chest. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the power cut out. A soft thump echoed from the porch. Then another. And another. She stared at the door. The amulet burned against her skin. The crying returned, not outside, but inside the walls, then under the floorboards, then right beside her ear. Elena screamed and turned, and saw it. A child, maybe 3 years old, crouched in the corner of the room, pale skin, hollow eyes, blood-stained teeth. It looked at her with a wide, unnatural grin. She couldn't move. It stood, not walked, stood. Bones cracking, limbs twitching like it had never learned to use them. Its mouth opened wider than it should, and from deep inside came not a cry, but a scream. Raw, ancient, inhuman. The window shattered. The red string on her wrist snapped in half. And the last thing she saw, before everything went dark, was it crawling toward her. Elena woke up on the healer's floor, surrounded by crushed herbs, candle wax, and a circle of salt. Her head throbbed. Her wrist was blistered where the red string had burned through skin. Lola Pilar sat beside her, eyes heavy with pity. "You're lucky," she said. "It didn't finish the claiming." Elena asked what that meant, what the creature was. Lola Pilar looked toward the jungle and whispered, "Tiyanak, spirit of the lost. It looks like a child, because that's what it used to be. Unbaptized, unnamed, abandoned before it ever drew breath." She explained that the Tiyanak lures the living with innocence, sound, need. But once you respond, once you acknowledge it, it marks you. And if it's strong enough, it follows you. Feeds off your fear. The villagers knew. That's why they warned her. That's why they left offerings. It wasn't superstition. It was survival. Elena's voice recorder. The strange recordings. The whispers. They weren't dreams. The moment she pressed play, the spirit had started listening. Lola Pilar told her the bond wasn't broken, just paused. She had days, maybe weeks. "Don't go near the forest," she said. "Don't listen to it again, because if you do, it'll finish what it started." Elena left the village before sunrise. She didn't wait for the bus. She walked until the road turned to gravel, then asphalt, then city noise. She checked into a crowded hostel in Cebu, surrounded herself with people, and kept the amulet tucked beneath her shirt, just in case. Weeks passed. She stopped writing her thesis, ignored every call from her professor. Every night, she kept a light on. Every morning, she woke up exhausted, unsure if she'd really slept at all. Then, one night, she heard it again. Not outside, not from the jungle, from the apartment next door. A baby, crying. Elena knocked on the neighbor's door, heart pounding, desperate to believe it was just a real child this time. But the neighbor answered, groggy and confused. No baby, no kids, just her, alone. The crying stopped. Elena went back to her room and opened her bag. The amulet, once solid and cool, had turned soft, warm. It pulsed in her palm like a heartbeat. She stared at it. And this time, she didn't pray. She listened. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video and want to listen to more true horror stories from Asia, feel free to subscribe and put on your notifications. I upload at least 3 times a week. Wish you all the best.